Great to be with you. So you heard about privacy, you heard about self-control, and I'm going to talk a little bit about privacy and self-control, and since we just heard about sex, I'm going to talk about privacy and self-control and sex, and let's see what happens. So it's clearly been a tough couple of years for privacy. You heard Professor Akisti describe what the world looks like in this age of complicated people and new technologies. And consumers clearly have been taking a beating, right? We're worried about how we're tracked. We're worried about how new privacy policies can change how our data is used. And we seem to have ugly headline and lawsuit and investigation one after another. But it's been tough for the businesses too. I mean, these are smart people. We sometimes joke, well, how could Facebook do that? How could Google do that? But I don't know. I haven't built a sort of $100 million or billion-dollar company, or I don't have hundreds of millions of users visiting my website and services. These are smart people. And they've got smart lawyers and smart chief marketing officers. And as new products and new features are rolled out, we continue to have crisis after crisis, company after company, stumbling and causing problem after problem. It's really kind of complicated. Let's just take an example. Do you guys remember, I see some young folks in the audience, once upon a time, when you went to Facebook, you saw your face. And your friends visited your page, and you visited their page, and you left messages. And then dramatically, Facebook made a change. You went, and all of a sudden, you saw everything that everybody else was doing on your page. They rolled out the news feed. And people hated it. They joined groups. They protested. Millions of users. Stop this. This is stalking. Stop it. Oh, that's really interesting. Look, Aunt Millie posted new pictures. Look who broke up with their girlfriend. Boom, we were hooked. And whether you think this has been responsible for the Arab Spring or revolutions, or whether it's just been a phenomenal way for us to, trade our cat pictures and our kid pictures, it's clearly dramatically changed the way we interact, and it's created this whole notion of the social web. And so it's not that easy. You can do things that people hate and then they love it, and sometimes it explodes, and sometimes it turns out to be the best possible feature. I remember when I first started using Facebook, I came home after a long day, and then there I was poking and thising, and my wife was getting a little bit annoyed. What are you doing there? I have to understand how this works. This is very interesting. I figured, I know what, I'll do something romantic. There was an app that allowed you to send a sort of sparkling, smoochy kiss. So I said, all right, I'll do that. It sort of had this pink, sparkling, glittery thing, and it said, honey, I love you so very much. I download the app, I hit send, and I'm like, wait, I got to check who I want to send. Yes, it's pre-checked all 700 or 800 of my friends, but no, okay, no big deal. I'll just post quickly on top of my wall. Sorry, all of you, for this, this app has turned me into an over-amorous spammer. I like you all, but I love only my wife. But you see, Facebook was on it. They didn't want anyone spamming hundreds of people, and so they had set up a rate limiting feature. And so what actually happened was that every single day for the next 3 months or so, some random collection of 7 or 8 people in my network got this message. My wife claims that she's actually never received this message. But the point is, I think, that users are very different. Age, ethnicity, background, culture. People have different attitudes. Some of us, like you've heard, will give away our DNA, for a pittance. Others really want to live off the grid on a mountain. And most of us kind of want a fair deal. We want to make sure nobody's taking advantage of us. And we'll share our data if we think there's some particular reason for that to happen. Professor Akisti has done a wonderful study where he actually told people, here's what people told us in this survey. They told us about their whether they cheated on their taxes, whether they this, whether this. And then he actually gave them a survey. And based on what they had just learned, how liberal others were in divulging personal information, they were dramatically different. So not only are we all different, we're all different based on what we've just heard or known. So how are companies going to get this right? And then we've got this profit motive, right? You got to make money. You need to use data to run all these new features and to monetize these things. So how can we get out of this hole we're in, where every week, every day, there's a headline, there's a crisis, and companies, we can't have a lawyer sitting behind every single engineer. And even these lawyers sometimes are wrong. And it's not just the big companies, right? The app developers. We need a path forward. And I suggest that a more sophisticated and nuanced path than just saying, respect privacy, when folks are driven to use data, would be to look at some of the other primal urges, right? We know that we have to control ourselves when it comes to food. We heard about that a bit earlier. We know we have to modulate when it comes to sex. So let's take an example and see how this might work. Right? I don't need to explain this, right? It's become sort of this joke. Your data is sold, and that's why it's free. One critic said recently that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product, right? So how can we move past? Now let's use the food and sex example for a second and see if we can learn anything. So Path was a great app. Many of you may know it. And its point was that Facebook, you had too many friends out there, right? You don't need those 600 friends I had. You really only have, at the time when they launched, 50 friends. Now they've expanded to 150. And they said, this is a more private place where your real friends are. And it's a mobile app. It's on your device. And we all know that mobile is personal, right? We've seen studies that tell us that a majority of us sleep with the phone within our reach. That didn't impress me, right? Because that's interesting. Here's what impressed me. A company that does warranties for cell phones, right? It put out that of the phones that are reported damaged from water, 15% of them have been dropped in the toilet, okay? We can't put these things down. So when you do stuff on mobile, you need to recognize that this is intimate. This is like coming into someone's house. And so here's this app. It's mobile. It's going to be a private related app because it's going to have this smaller audience. And it's got to be usable because we have no patience, right? Click, it's got to work. I'm not waiting while you download, right? I remember the days of dial-up. I see dial-up leaders. I spent years at AOL. Now it's like instant. And on our phone, no, now it's got to be instant on my phone as well. So what did app do? What did the Path app do? When you downloaded it, what do? You want to be friends with your friends. So it needed your contacts. So it automatically uploaded your contacts. So that when you were ready, they were there for you to say, oh, would you like to be friends with me on this app? Boom, everything broke out. They didn't ask. Now they ask. They didn't ask. They uploaded it, and when everyone got very upset, they couldn't understand what was going on. We were just doing this for usability. We weren't stealing your contacts. We were loading them up to our service to have it ready when you wanted it. And I get why they were confused. But I think if they think about it in terms of food, you'd understand. I invite you into my house. You walk over to the refrigerator. You help yourself to some pie. Now, that pie was for you. I was going to serve you that pie. Ask me for the pie. I will happily give you some pie. But you don't walk into my house and just take my pie. You do that, you cause a crisis. So I think food makes it. Okay. All right. How does sex fit in here? Professor Helen Nisbaum, a wonderful academic, has talked about privacy as being data used in context. Not necessarily hiding your data, but I give it to you for the certain purpose that I expect. We have a certain relationship. And if I do something that's really out of context, that's where we create this sort of stressful situation. And context can change, right? If I said to you, take off your clothes, you'd say, who are you? If I was your doctor, it would be appropriate. If we were friends, it wouldn't be. But if we started a relationship, maybe it would be. And these things develop nuance by nuance. And they don't develop in very rigid ways, right? They don't develop, okay, is it okay now? May I have formal permission to do this? We've seen colleges where there's been a code. People are worried about alcohol and date rape. So there's been a code where you've got to ask for consent at every particular stage, in the romantic evening. And we get the goal, but it seems sort of a little bit, structured and challenging for it to actually work sometimes in real life. We've heard about colleges where men can be in the women's dorm as long as there's always 3 legs on the floor, right? Like, what? That's going to stop things? I mean, it's got to be done. So you can't lunge at my data. You can't lunge at me. We've got to move from one context to another. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It means you've got to keep in mind. And you might have to set the tone in advance, right? If I go into a bar on sort of the pickup night, that's one sort of environment. If it's a massage parlor, that's one sort of environment. If it's a business meeting or a different social thing, there's a different tone. And businesses also have to set the tone. So we use Amazon. That's a pretty intimate relationship, right? They're going to track my books, what I read, my videos, and they're going to sell me more. I keep getting offered 50 Shades of Grey, and I'm looking for privacy books. It's 50 Shades of Grey, 50 Shades of Grey. People like you evidently read 50 Shades of Grey. It's a very personal relationship, but we get it, right? We like it, we get it, we seem to be buying stuff there. But not that long ago, Orbitz. Orbitz realized that you Mac users in the audience, you're a little cooler and richer than the rest of us. And so they offered, when you went to Orbitz, if you were a Mac user, they could tell, if you were a Mac user, then you were offered a higher end vacation. And boom, everyone got alarmed. Who are they to be deciding what I want? While Amazon is out there having, some wild time with your data, and you're loving it. But Orbitz hadn't set the tone, right? That's not what the deal was. That's not what you expected. And so there was a backlash. So the challenge today is that companies are seeking intimate relationships with us, right? This is a smart web. We want smart data. But they're not always setting the tone. We think we're out with Richie Cunningham, but we're out with the Fonz. We really got to get this right. It's so important. New data uses, whether for research, for health, for the scientific breakthroughs that are possible, for the new services, or even for more effective marketing, is so important to our future. But as companies and computers and algorithms increasingly do more and more for us, if we can't trust the custodians of our data with our information, it's continued stress and continued conflict. But if we can be as sophisticated as we are in the nuanced ways that we deal with self-control, with our food, with our physical and intimate relationships, if companies can be that sophisticated, we can hope, I think, for the respectful relationships that are necessary to support innovation and to support progress. Thank you.